Just turn it on, yeah.
Happy Mother's Day. Today is Mother's Day, and it's a great day to celebrate mothers, and I'm so happy that I've got two very special young ladies here with me.
Aww.
Justine became my daughter in 2007. She came all the way from Germany and stayed with me for a full year, and we just learned to love her so much. She's been back a couple of times since then, and it's always such a joy to have her with us.
Amen.
We love you dearly, Justine.
Amen.
And now we love Nora. Nora's her good friend that they said they've been friends for about 20 years, and she came over with her, so now she's just one of ours too. That's how it is at my house. If you come with one of our kids, you become one of ours as well. And so, but I am so thankful that she got to come in, and it worked out that it happened to be on Mother's Day weekend. So anyway, thank you all for welcoming her. I'm going to read this little thing before I start my message, and it's called When God Created Mothers. It says, and I didn't write this, so I'm not trying to take anybody's work. It belongs to somebody else. When God created mothers, when the Lord was creating mothers, he was on his 6th day of overtime when the angel appeared and said, "You're taking a lot of time on this one." And God said, "Have you read the specs on this model? She has to be completely washable, but not plastic, have 180 movable parts, all replaceable, run on black coffee and leftovers, have a lap that disappears when she stands up, a kiss that can cure anything from a broken leg to a disappointed love affair, and 6 pair of hands." The angel shook his head slowly and said, 6 pair of hands? No way. It's not the hands that are causing me the problem, as God said. It's the 3 pair of eyes that mothers have to have. And that's just on the standard model. Asked the angel. God nodded. 1 pair that sees through closed doors when she's asking, "What are you doing in there?" when she already knows what they're doing because she's got the eyes to see through. She has to have another here in the back of her head that sees what she shouldn't, but what she has to know. And of course, the ones here in the front that can look at a child when he goofs up and say, "I understand, and I love you," without so much as uttering a word. God said, the angel touching his sleeve gently, "Get some rest tomorrow." "I can't," said God. "I'm so close to creating something so close to myself. Already I have one that heals herself when she is sick, can feed a family of 6 on 1 pound of hamburger, and can get a 9-year-old to stand under a shower." The angel circled the model of the mother very slowly. "It's so soft," the angel sighed. "But tough," said God excitedly. "You can imagine what this mother can do or endure. Can it think?" "Not only can it think, but it can reason and compromise," said the Creator. Finally, the angel bent over and ran his finger across the cheek. "There's a leak," she said. "I told you that you were trying to put too much into this model." "It's not a leak," said the Lord. "It's a tear." "What's it for?" "It's for joy, sadness, disappointment, pain, loneliness, and pride." There is something so special about mothers. When God created mothers, he created truly something to be reckoned with. Today I'm going to talk to us, though, about a woman that I don't know that I've ever really heard a Mother's Day message on her, but I want us to look at a mother in the Bible, and her name is Ruth. We have a whole book in the Bible about this woman. It contains 4 chapters, and there's a whole lot that's contained in just that one book. Generally, though, when we hear about Ruth, it's about her and Boaz and the relationship that they had that models Jesus and his relationship with us as our Redeemer, because Boaz was her Redeemer. But today I want us to look at some characteristics that Ruth exhibited that made her a great mother as well as a great individual. Ruth was set in a time before there was a king and all the judges ruled in Israel. It was a very dark time in the country as everyone did what they wanted to. And that sounds kind of like where we live today. Everybody just wants to do the wrong thing. God's people had hardened their hearts, and how many of you all know we're living in such a time as that today? Christians in particular, have just turned their back on God. We read in verse 1 that because there was a bad famine in Bethlehem, A man named Elimelech and his wife Naomi took their sons to live in the country of Moab, a land that was rich in soil and that was not experiencing famine. But Moab was an eternal enemy of Israel. It's not going too far to say that it's a bit like Israel and Hamas are today. They were mortal enemies. The people of Israel had been instructed in the book of Deuteronomy never to enter into a treaty or a friendship with these people. So right there's where they made their very first mistake. They did something that they knew that God had told them, do not do that. But Elimelech disregarded God's law and went anyway. Can I tell you that it will always end badly when we go against God and his laws? I don't care who you are, how it seems. Things may appear better for a while, but I can also tell you that things are not always as they seem. God's law will prevail, and we see here in the story of Ruth during their stay in Moab, Naomi's husband Elimelech died, and then about 10 years later, both of her sons died as well, leaving behind their young wives who were from Moab, Orpah and Ruth. So now here we have 3 widows. You have to understand that widows in this time in the ancient world, they were thought of as nothing. If somebody didn't come on, if they didn't have a kinsman redeemer that came along underneath them and took care of them, they were kind of like homeless people are today in our society. So Naomi here is in a foreign land where she wasn't supposed to be, so she definitely had no one to step in and take care of her. So in steps her daughter-in-laws. Naomi decides to go home, and because she thought, well, at least there I have some family. I have somebody who can help take care of me. And as she starts on her journey, her daughters-in-law follow her, but Naomi turns around and releases them of their obligation to do so. Her one daughter-in-law, Orpah, returns to her own family, but her other daughter-in-law, Ruth, will not leave her mother-in-law and instead returns to Israel with Naomi. In Israel, I'm just giving you the background of the 4 chapters. In Israel, Ruth begins providing for both herself and her mother-in-law by gleaning from the fields the remnants that the Old Testament law mandated that farmers leave to provide for the poor and the widows. In other words, the farmers, by law, had to leave bits and pieces of the fields as they were harvesting so that the widows and the less fortunate could come along and have something to eat. While she's in the field, Boaz notices her, and he asks who she is, and they tell her that she's a relative through her mother-in-law, Naomi. Finally, at the end of chapter 4, we discover that Ruth has a son and turns out to be the father of David's father, Jesse, and ultimately Ruth, a foreigner who the Old Testament had explicitly prohibited the Israelite people from even befriending, let alone marrying, became the great, 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 great times 25 greats grandmother of Jesus. That proves to me that Jesus can take anybody and make something of them when he has a plan for your life. It does not matter who you are. It does not matter what side of the tracks you came from. It does not matter what color your skin is. It does not matter what nationality you are. When you give your life to God, he will make a way to do whatever he wants done with your life. And I'm so thankful for that. I'm thankful that there was a time that in society, growing up, I was considered worthless. Let us be honest. My mother, we didn't have anything. We were poor as church mice. Ate bologna every day because it was the cheapest meat that you could buy. Had one pair of shoes, usually had to last at least a year, if not 2. And we'd cut out cardboard cereal boxes and put in the foot of my shoe because it had holes in it. And just to keep it from my feet from being wet, my mother would patch it that way. So I didn't come from a great background, but God. God loved me. Even as bad as I was, I didn't have a good reputation. I wasn't a good kid. I wasn't really bad. But because I was poor, I thought I had to fight for everything that I got. But God, he changed my life. He turned it around. And as I thought about Ruth and I looked at these 4 chapters, I was amazed at that she left such a simple, profound legacy for all of us. I've discovered that 5 minutes after we're gone, More important than anything we obtained or accomplished in this world will be the mark that we leave on the lives of those we loved. The real mark of a person's greatness is not in their wealth or their worldly accomplishments, but in their legacy. What legacy are we leaving behind? Ruth was the mother of Obed, who was the father of Jesse, who was the father of David. So this makes her the great-grandmother of David. And I want us to look at some simple yet powerful characteristics that Ruth had as she actually was in a foreign land now. But as she learned to follow God, God transformed her life and made her fit in with that society. The real mark of a person's legacy is not in their wealth or their worldly accomplishments, but in their legacy. The first thing we see about the legacy of David's great-grandmother was that she was loyal. From the very beginning of the story, we find a woman who refuses to abandon her mother-in-law. When Naomi began the trip home and her daughters-in-law began following Naomi, she turned to them and released them. She basically said, you're still young, you can still remarry, go back to your families, have a life of your own, you don't owe me anything. Because she said, nobody will marry you where we're going. You're going to be a foreigner there. Nobody's going to want you there. Orpah turned around and went home. But Ruth, the story tells us that Orpah, one of Naomi's daughters-in-law, did return to her family, but that Ruth clung to Naomi. She wouldn't let her go. And in verses 16 and 17, Ruth pledges her allegiance and her devotion to her mother-in-law. We're not really told why Ruth does this, but it may have been because Ruth could see that Naomi was getting older and needed her. That's compassion. When you look at somebody and you can see that they truly need you. Ruth knew that there would be no one to take care of her mother-in-law and no one to provide for her basic needs. She was too old to remarry. And so Ruth decided that she would continue the commitment that she had made to her deceased husband by caring for his mother. I want you all to know that that kind of loyalty is rare. We live in a culture that is so self-centered that relationships are forged and broken on the basis of convenience. It's not convenient for me to go take care of my mother-in-law. And in a lot of cases, kids say, it's not convenient for me to go take care of my mother. It's not convenient for me to go take care of my father. They can just fend for themselves. They can lay up there and die. And that's the society, sadly, that we're living in. But Ruth was moved with compassion, and she stayed loyal to her mother-in-law. I encourage all of us today here, both men and women, to commit to the relationships that we're in, whether it's a marriage, whether it's family, whether it's friendship. Be loyal. It will be a trait to which you will be remembered. I can say this, that two of the ladies in this church have been my best friends for close to 30 years probably. I know that I could go to Renee or Pastor any time of the day or night, and they have seen me through some of the roughest times in my life. They've stood by me, they've prayed with me, they've come alongside of me. They have been loyal friends, and I am so thankful for them. I am so, so thankful to have them. The second thing that we see in the life of Ruth was that she never stopped loving. In chapter 1, verse 8, Naomi says to her daughter-in-law, "May the Lord deal kindly with you, as you have dealt with the dead and with me." The Hebrew text uses a word that carries a powerful meaning which is lost in most of our English translations. The word is hesed, and it's used repeatedly in the Old Testament to refer to God's love for us. It's unconditional love. The word was first used to describe the nature of the covenant between us and God. In the past, we've learned that God entered into a covenant relationship with the Hebrew people. In a covenant, both sides agree to terms. And a typical covenant is if one side broke the agreement, then the other side was released from their obligation to that covenant. But we're told that unlike typical covenants, God's love for us is hesed. It's unconditional and it's unmerited. In other words, even when we fail, God continues to love. God never stops love. Even when we break our side of the agreement, God does not. He remains faithful. He loves us, period. He loves us. Nothing we can do will make him love us anymore. And there's nothing that we can do that will make him love us any less. I don't care how bad you get, what you do, what you say, God will still love you. That's the same word that's used to describe Ruth. That's the kind of love for which we are remembered as parents. And isn't it incredible to know that God loves us with that same kind of love? I can't imagine my kids doing anything that would ever make me not love them. I definitely have not always agreed with them. I've not always backed them, so to speak, or come alongside of them. I've always said, hey, you're in the wrong, but I still love you. There is nothing that a child, in most normal incidences, can do that causes a parent to stop loving them. You may not have a relationship. Some of my daughters have walked away from me for months at a time, didn't speak to me, didn't look at me, wanted nothing to do with me. But God always fixed it, always repaired it, always brought it back to what it needed to be, because I always loved them. I didn't care what they said about me. I didn't care the lies that they told. I didn't care. They were still my babies. And I don't care how old they get to be, they're still going to be my babies, and I'm still going to love them, and I still want relationship with them. The third characteristic that's evident in the life of Ruth, as we hear this often as families talk about their mothers or grandmothers, is that she was a hard worker. I know that seems to be just a simple little statement, but if we stop and think about a member of your family that you remember with great fondness, one of the things, certainly not most important, but important nonetheless, would be how hard they worked. You ask about, well, how was your grandma? Oh, she was a hard worker. How was he was a hard worker. How was your mom? They were hard workers. So she had a great work ethic, Ruth did. The beginning of the second chapter of Ruth tells us that she was on her feet working in the fields without resting for hours and hours throughout a whole day. She would stop long enough to get just a bite of food or a drink of water, but she continued throughout the whole entire day. She was a worker. There have got to be appropriate boundaries in life. I don't think anybody needs to be not an alcoholic. You don't need to be that either, but you definitely don't need to be a workaholic. You need to have time to spend with your friends and with your family, but it is important to be a good worker. Being a good hard worker is something that we pass on to our children and their children for generations to come. And unfortunately, it seems to be something that is missing in today's society. Again, we don't see very many people wanting to get out and get a job. You see for hire signs everywhere. And even at McDonald's, who pays $15 an hour, they change personnel like every week. It's new people who are in there, and new people are in there, and it's because people don't want to work. And so we need to have a good work ethic. We need to be willing to get in there, grub, shuck, whatever we need to do to make a living, to provide for our families. I'm so thankful that God did provide a husband for me that worked, and I didn't have to outside of the home. I did work inside the home a lot and did a lot of things, but I was thankful to be able to stay home with my children, because to me, the greatest thing that I could ever do was to be a great mother. The fourth characteristic is that she never thought about herself. She was selfless. If I were to point to the person that I admired most in this life, it would be my mother. She was selfless. She always put me and my brother and what we needed, and most of the time what we wanted, before herself. I can remember a time that she had gallbladder surgery. And back 60 years ago, it wasn't quite as easy as it is today. They cut you open from side to side, and it was a pretty serious surgery. But I'm going to tell you, the day that my mama got out of the hospital, she came home, got me and my brother, and took us to Wise County Fair, because she had told us she would. She was selfless with her love. She loved us beyond everything. She put the nurses and the nuns that she worked with above herself. She worked many double shifts so that somebody else could have off for something that they needed off for. She taught the nuns how to drive. She was the one who did everything with them. She took them on retreats to North Carolina. My mother was selfless. She put everybody before herself. She put her parents before herself. Many times coming in from working all night, she'd load them up, take them to High Knob to Bark Camp Lake, and go fishing and fish all day, because that's what they loved to do. And she always thought more of others than herself. I want to be remembered as that sort of person, but more importantly, I want to be that kind of person. I hope that when my kids and my grandkids and those around me look at me, that they say, she was selfless. We could have asked her for anything and she would have tried to do it. We could have asked her to go anywhere, take us, even you all as friends. I would do it. I would do my very best to do whatever it needed to be done. In the book of Ruth, we find a woman who was more concerned about the needs of others than her own. We also find a woman who was extremely humble, as we see in verse 10 when she says, "Why have I found favor in your sight? Who am I? Who am I that you're concerned about me?" She was humble. She didn't think that anybody owed her anything. The reality is too many of us are trying to get noticed. Rather than simply working hard and living our lives as we know we ought, we become obsessed with what others think to the point that our pride gets out of control. One of the best traits that we can embody is humility and high respect for others. The fifth characteristics we see in the life of Ruth, and which we see in the lives of a lot of good mothers, is that she was crafty. I'm not talking about her ability to make things, arts and crafts and all that, although that will be important. If you're a mother, you will have to make lots of things and put together lots of projects. But the dictionary defines crafty as being sly or cunning. We see it in Ruth when she approaches Boaz to propose marriage. She's got a plan worked out which goes beyond what was instructed by her mother-in-law. She knew how to handle herself, and she knew how to work within the system to bring about a good outcome. Have you ever known a person who outsmarted you for your own good? I was amazed when I was studying this, because I've always thought, why did she lay down at his feet? What's the deal with that? That was in essence a marriage proposal. I did not know that till I was studying this. She laid down at his feet because she was asking him to step in and be her redeemer. Cover me, become my cover, redeem me from where I'm at. And Boaz did. I'm going to tell you this little story, though, about being cunning. According to a news report, a certain private school in Victoria was faced with a unique problem. A number of 12-year-old girls were beginning to use lipstick and would put it on in the bathroom. That was fine, but after they put on their lipstick, they would press their lips to the mirror, leaving dozens of little lip prints all over the mirrors. Every night, the maintenance man would remove them, and the next day, the girls would put them back. Finally, the principal decided that something had to be done about all these lip prints on the mirror. She called all the girls to the bathroom, met them there with the maintenance man. She explained that all these lip prints were causing a major problem for the custodian, who had to clean those mirrors every night. To demonstrate how difficult it had been to clean the mirrors, she asked the maintenance man to show the girls how much effort was required. He took out a long-handled squeegee, dipped it in the toilet, and cleaned the mirror with it. Since then, there have been no lip prints on the mirror. There are teachers, and then there are educators. Who wants to kiss the commode? There comes a time in our life when a little bit of craftiness is a good thing. If used wisely, it can instruct others. We need to be crafty. The sixth characteristic of Ruth was that everyone respected her. After Ruth's son is born, the other women in the community are visiting with Naomi, and they say this to Ruth: "Your daughter is better than 7 sons would have been." You think about the significance of that statement. In ancient culture, the worth of a woman was dependent upon her ability to produce a male heir to carry on her husband's name. Naomi's sons had died, so she was at risk of losing her ability for her family tree to continue growing. But these women say Ruth is better than 7 sons by her loyalty, by her love, by her hard work, by her selflessness, by her craftiness, Ruth had gained the respect of those around her. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, Ruth was used by God. We know this because not only did she become the great-grandmother of David, but an ancestor of Jesus himself. Can you imagine that? A woman from the outside of Israel in a day and age in which the only worshipers of God were in Israel, marries an Israelite which was against the Jewish law, but yet she becomes the great-grandmother of David and later of the Messiah. I don't know about you, but that encourages me. God does not choose us according to bloodlines, genetics, or ability, but according to the heart and according to his plans. But like Ruth, we have to be willing to submit to those plans. Ruth was a woman who left behind an amazing legacy. A legacy is when you leave something behind that is worthy of the life that you want others to remember. These are the characteristics that Ruth had. Be loyal, which is another word for faithful. Be faithful to those in your life, to where you are. Naomi and her family left where they were going to when things looked better and on the other side, and they thought things were going to be easier, but the consequences were horrible. Her husband died, her 2 sons died, and she returned back to her own country bitter and broken. Things sometimes look better down the road. Oh, that church down there, they preach better. Or that church over there, they've got better music. That job down there, I think I could make more money. Be careful that you don't jump out of where God has you to go to a place that looks better, but you end up losing. She lost her husband, she lost her 2 sons, and she returned home empty. Love unconditionally. Ruth didn't have to love Naomi, but she did. Our love shouldn't depend on what others do or don't do. It's a choice for us. We can choose to love. No matter what somebody's done to you, no matter where they are, we can choose to love. I choose love because he loved me first. He loved me when I was in a ditch, when I was unlovable, when I was ugly, when I was a sinner. He loved me. He chose to love me. It was my choice to love him back, and I'm thankful for that. Be a hard worker. Don't shirk your responsibilities. Be diligent. There's a scripture that says, whatever you do, do well. For when you go to the grave, there will be no work or planning or knowledge or wisdom. That's found in Ecclesiastes 9:10. There's another version of it that says, whatever your hands find to do, do with all your might, and to work hard. So the Bible teaches us we need to be hard workers. Be selfless. Put others before yourself. Do to others what you would like them to do to you. This is the essence of all that is taught in the law and the prophets. That's Matthew 7:12. In other words, do unto others what you would have others do unto you. We've heard that. It's called the golden rule. We've heard it all of our life, but it is also biblical. A lot of sayings that we have are not biblical. They're just sayings that somebody came up with, and most of them are really good, but this one's biblical. Do unto others what you would have them do unto you. In other words, be a good person. Be crafty, not making things, although like I said, if you're a parent, you're going to have to make some things. Well, all the projects that I've made, Justine and I were talking about the last time that she was here, we had to make a big box. It was called the Big Sister Reveal, and Kerrigan was in cheerleading. And we worked on that big box half the night to get it ready for her to go to her cheer thing. So you will have to do some crafts, but that's not the crafty that I'm talking about. There's a saying, you catch more flies with honey than you do with vinegar. That's being crafty. Respect. Respect can be defined as thinking and feeling good about a person. Also, it's treating someone in a way that shows them that you care about their well-being. When you respect someone, you consider them as a person of worth. Respect isn't earned, it's given. I'm sure you've heard this saying before. Basically, it means to act in a way that is worthy of respect. We see that Ruth was this type of woman, one to be respected. My question for you today on this Mother's Day is whether you're a mother or not, or what kind of legacy are you leaving now? What will others remember about you? Are you respected? Are you loyal? Are you hardworking? Are you selfless? Are you dependable? Because people depend on you. When you tell them you're going to do something, you're going to be somewhere, are you dependable and you show up and you're there and you do? Do you love unconditionally? And most importantly, are you following Jesus? That's the most important legacy that you could ever leave behind, is the fact that you followed Jesus. When others look at my life, I pray above all else that they see Jesus in me. If I could write my epitaph, it would be simply to say, she loved Jesus, she loved people. I pray that others see that in my life. I hope all of you all have a very happy Mother's Day.